I'm not sure. I was trying to figure out what I should call this, and what I really wanted to call it was why doing this has gotten so much harder over time. And so that's what I'm going to start with. So I'm going to start with polls. So here's the 2016 general election, Trump versus Clinton. And you can see that Clinton won by 2.1, the popular vote, and we were off. We had her winning by a couple, 1.5 to 2 points better. And so when I say we in this case, talk about pollsters in general, but in the specific case, this is YouGov Economist poll, of which I'm not a participant in the sense of I don't get any money off it, but I am a consultant with them and work on their data sets. Then in 2020, we tried to fix that bias. We didn't. The polls had the polls had Biden up by 7 points, and he won by 4.4. So again, we didn't have it fixed. Okay, so then the third thing, what's happening today? This is Harris. This is after Biden's gone. So this is Harris, and it's very close. So if we're wrong, so what did we do? So what did we do? First thing is, pollster, what did we do to fix this Trump? In other words, the error was not random. In 2016 and 2020, error is not random, it's systematic. We're underestimating the Trump vote. So what did we do? Well, we have a project called Stanford, Arizona State, and Yale called SAY. And we have the largest single poll ever conducted. We have a panel study, which means it's the same people. We can track individuals over time. And we have 120,000 people in that poll. We have polled them 6 times so far. We'll poll them another 6 times, 2 or 3 times before the election, then immediately after the election, and a couple follow-ups. So in addition to making the sample much larger, the second thing we did was we went in and got VoteSmart so that we checked whether the people in our sample have actually voted. They say that a lot of people say they vote, and they don't. But we know who voted and who didn't because you can get that out of the public record. And the third thing we did was we increased, when we looked at the 2020 results, it looked to us like what we'd done wrong was we didn't have enough rural voters. So now we have 7,000 more rural voters. So in addition to the 120,000 poll, we also, Stanford has the first week. We have a poll of 7,500 people, again a panel. Then Arizona State has 7,500, there 7,500. Then Yale has theirs, and then we combine in a joint one. So we have 4 polls, once every week, 7,500, same people for Stanford, same people, so we can make comparisons, and then the big poll. So how did we come to this sort of difficulty? And this is Gallup polls from 1937 to 2024. And as you can see, the Democrats were the dominant party. That's the blue line. Democrats are the dominant party for quite a bit of time. There's a drop-off in the 60s, and that drop-off in the 60s is the result of the civil rights movement. Civil rights legislation passed by the Democrats, and some southern states go Republican at that point. But the big change is in the 1980s with Reagan. And over time, here's what happened in the 80s. First, because of the Depression, the Democrats always had the advantage in terms, whenever there was an economic crisis, people thought the go-to party was the Democrats because they'd fixed it. In the 80s, that disappears. Now neither party has that advantage. So that's gone. And the second thing is the cultural issue. The Republican Party had been the party that had the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment in their. Second, the Republican Party, until Reagan, had been a party where more Republicans were pro-choice than Democrats. Democrats were the more conservative party, and that switched over that time period also. So parties got closer. And what caused that? This is party by ideology in 1980. And what you should look at, the blue line is Democrats. And these people, a Democrat. Democrats, blue is liberal. So you can see that the Democratic Party is pretty liberal, but they got a lot of moderates and some conservatives on the left. Now, you can see the Republican Party is even kind of more heterogeneous in the sense that they have conservatives, they're more conservatives, but there's still quite a bit of moderates and some liberals. Now look, and the parties sort. What happens with Reagan is the parties sort. Liberals move away from the Republican Party into the Democratic Party and vice versa. So here's that thing in 2024. That's the line there. So what's happened is the Democratic Party is a liberal party, and it is a party that is more heterogeneous than the Republican Party because there are more moderates, but the Republican Party is overwhelmingly conservative with about 16, 18% moderates. And then if you look at independents, they've always stayed the same. They're moderate. And they're less concerned about politics, less likely to vote, don't know as much about politics. So what's happened is the parties have sorted. And in terms of that sorting, it makes all kinds of things hard. I can't go into the whole list of all of those, but it means elections are closer, harder to compromise, so on and so forth. That happens, and that's how. So that makes elections harder to predict. So it used to be easier. There used to be an economic equation. This is the Ray-Fair model. There are a lot of them. You can expect academics messed around with a joint. But if you just knew the growth of real GDP in the first 3 quarters, growth of GDP deflator in the first 15 quarters, and the number of good news quarters where growth was over 3.2, okay, then this is an amazing result. This is the prediction rate for that model. You don't know anything. All you know is how the economy's doing. And the point is, if the economy's doing well, what happens is voters reward the incumbent president's party, whether they're running again or whether whoever it is, they reward the incumbent party, and the elections predict exceedingly well. That was great. You could just put the equations up, run the stuff, say, here's a winner. Unfortunately, and then there was a couple errors in that model. So Doug Hibbs at Harvard came up with the bread and peace model, where he adds to the economic model, he adds how many how many American troops are engaged abroad in conflict, and then the model works even better. These slides, by the way, are available to, I make them available to anybody. Now, what's happened to that economic model? Here's the 2012 election. That blue line is Democrats who say, how's the economy? The Democrats say it's great. Look at Republicans. Technical term, it sucks. So, and the economy wasn't bad. And here's my favorite. This is 2016. In October, before the election, 65% of Democrats thought that the economy was doing well. Only 20% of Republicans thought that. In December, after the election, before Trump is sworn in, look at the jump. Now, Republicans, 70% of Republicans think the economy is doing well, and about 15% of Democrats think it's doing well. So if people are basing their view of what happens in the economy and their vote, and it's now partisan, those economic models no longer predict. They're just off. They don't work anymore. So that makes it worse. And here's, by the way, the latest one. I just got this from YouGov, The Economist, yesterday. Here's perceptions of the economy. You see on the left, Democrats, about 10% think it's excellent. And then a huge number of Democrats think it's okay. And now you can see on the far right how the Republicans see the economy. 60% of Democrats think the economy is excellent to good, and 62% of Republicans think it's poor. Okay, so that leads you to say, it's just another example. That's continued, and it's not just continued. that polarization and that divisiveness has gotten worse. And that extends to so many things that I can't go into. Perception of the parties. I think, I'm going to try and remember this. Yeah, so Democrats think that like 47% of Republicans make more than $250,000 a year. And they think most of them are old, way off. And on the other hand, Republicans think like 30% of Democrats are LGBTQ. The perceptions are unbelievable. And when you ask people, if you ask people, what if your son, daughter comes home and wants to marry a Republican or a Democrat? Not good. Not good. So that's the world we live in. So now I want to turn to the state of the race, and these polls are from the surveys I talked about. This is from the SAE, Stanford, Arizona State, Yale poll, combination of either the 7,500 ones or the 120,000 ones. When we get to the end where we actually talk about what's going to happen in terms of the states, then it'll be the 120,000 poll. And I've left you with our estimate of where each of the 50 states is, and you're welcome to those. So where are we today? So on the left, and this is tracing individuals, okay? So this is Biden versus Trump, and you can see that after that debate, right before the Trump line, after the debate, Trump is winning 2-3 points. And if you think about from our perspective, did we get the gap right? Well, now we got a gap that shows Harris is up by 2 points, but now Trump's up by 3, so he could be up by 5 or 6. So it could be big Trump win. So then, of course, what happens in the second half over there is Harris comes in. But I want you to know, when she starts out, she's about where Biden was. And then she slowly picks up. Where'd she pick up? She didn't gain anything among Republicans. Did a little bit better among independents. But the reason she came back up is because after Biden, that period where you see the drop up, but where he's falling down, what happens is the Democrats started moving to saying we're for third-party candidates. There are many more votes for RFK. There's more votes for other candidates. And a lot of Democrats saying, I'm not sure, I don't know. And so what happens to tighten the race up again quickly is those Democrats come back. They're now enthused about it. They sort of like her. And you can see that she's picked it up. And then you're in the polls where we are right now, where Harris looks like she has. So if you look at Real Clear Politics average, if you look at 538 average, and the reason you average those polls, the reason they do it is because if there's error in all of them, if you average out over them, you have a better perspective. And in all of them, she's ahead. So what else did she do? This is an election, by the way, Trump versus Biden, that large numbers of Americans did not wish to see. Pardon? This is just the polls for everybody. We're getting there. We're getting there. We're getting there. Don't jump ahead. We got time to fill. And you're not backbenchers, and I'm not getting paid. So no jumping ahead. Yeah. Okay. So they're a double hater. There were a huge number of double haters. Double haters that say, I don't want either one of them to run. And that continues. So as you can see, one thing the Harris candidacy did was the number of double haters dropped pretty much. So it made the race tighter again. It made the race viable. And that's where we were on that. Now, how about the debates? Everybody, how many watched the Biden debate? How long did you stay? I couldn't. I left. Yeah, I left early. Okay, so winning the debate. These are numbers. So we polled. This is a separate poll. We had polled 30,000 people before the debate, during the debate, after the debate, day after, and 2 days after the debate. And so who won the debate? For Democrats, 30% thought Biden would win. No, that's right. So Biden, there was a 16% drop. People thought he actually lost. And then on the Harris debate, you can see that people thought Harris won, and Trump dropped, which both reasonable, right? In short, the data showed what people thought. Trump won the first debate, and Harris won the second debate. Doesn't mean you're winning votes. Here's the change. Democrats, if you're a Democrat and Biden lost, you suddenly think, oh, gee, Trump's a great candidate. I think I'll vote for him. Didn't happen. They didn't move. And look at the numbers for Harris. Trump. People say what? 0, 0, 0, -1. So winning the debate didn't do much for you. And so that's another thing that makes this election, don't say that, makes this election hard, is almost nothing changes. You check the poll, boom, 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 there's very little movement. So there you are. It's just, once people are set like this and they're polarized, it's hard to move. It's hard to move people. But you can change minds. Polls do a little. Not the polls, but the debate. First debate, it took a couple weeks for it to happen, but was Biden too old? Went from 64 to 70, and ultimately, as you know, that's what did him in. As Democratic House candidates, Pelosi and others kept coming to him and saying, this is not good, you're not doing well, and so they finally got him to it. And Trump, after the first debate, there were about 3% more who thought that Trump was too old, and a little change in that in the thing. All right, so then what about issues? So really, basically, if you think about it, right, there's only 3 places you can get votes. You can get votes from your base, which is members. If you're a Democrat, you vote Democrat. Republican, you vote Republican. You get defectors, Democrats who switch, Republicans who switch, and you get independents. That's it. There's no other place to get votes. So how did Harris do among it? So one of the questions we ask is, which of the candidates do you think would be better at handling this issue? And so that's this tale. And as so you can see, on abortion, Harris has the advantage over Trump. On the issue of the economy, then Trump has the advantage over Harris. And on immigration, it's the largest. I'm going to come back a little bit later to people who think this is the most important issue rather than this general, who do you think would manage it better? So you can see that Harris does better than Biden. In these figures, Harris compared to Biden, she's doing much better than Biden did. But the bottom line is, on abortion, she's doing well, but on the economy and on immigration, she is seen as not as able as Trump to deal with this. Now, so given that this is all so close, and the question then is, well, what if we're wrong on the polls? What if we continue to underestimate the Trump vote? Then we'd be wrong. So I made 2 other efforts to try and deal with this. Don't worry, we're going to get to those real states. The efforts. So the first effort I wanted to make was just the basic one I just told you about. There's 3 places you can get votes. We know Biden won in 2020, and so if you look at that, Democrats, 95.7% of Democrats voted for Biden. Only 2.5% of Democrats voted for Trump, whereas 5.2% of Republicans voted for Biden. And there's the other candidates fell away. And among independents, you can see that among independents, Biden was close. So that's within our margin of error. So we could have split them, but the point is they're close. Now, if we look at 2024, on the same thing, Harris is carrying Democrats, 95-1, and she's getting a few more votes from the Republicans than Trump is getting from Democrats, but not as much as Biden. And then among independents, she's down 9, 10 points. So what changed? So I thought, that's great. It doesn't help me at all. Because it says, yeah, she's not as good as where Biden was, but is it good enough? Don't know. So then I looked at issues. These issues are ranked from 1 through 5. Inflation was, for Americans in general, the most important issue. Democrats, it was 13% of Democrats said that was the most important issue to them. I have nothing for the Democrats in 2 because only 2% of Democrats said immigration was a problem. Jobs in the economy, about 10. Democracy, Democrats thought about 14, and abortion about 8. So if you think of these issues, so on the inflation issue, if you go back to that previous table, if you're a Democrat and you're concerned about inflation is the most important issue, instead of having 95% Democratic support, she has 89. And if you're a Democrat who cares about the jobs and the economy, it goes to 98%. And if you're a Democrat who's concerned about democracy as an issue, then it's 100%. And on abortion, it goes about the same thing. So those issues of jobs in the economy, democracy, and abortion help her Democratic vote. The only place where she gets votes from Republicans is on the abortion issue. So if you're a Republican, about 6% of Republicans said abortion was the most important issue to them. Then instead of her getting 3.2, she gets an additional, she gets about 14% more. She gets about 18%. But remember, it's only about 6% of Republicans that say that abortion. But here's where the problem is on independence. So independence, if inflation, which is the most important issue, right, she loses 17.4%. On immigration, which is, I think, 13%, 12 or 13% for independence, she loses big there. So the only place she gains is democracy and the other 2, but those first 3 issues, the economic issues, are bigger than the others. So it looks on the issue like there's a slight net gain at this point for Trump. So again, having done this, I still couldn't come forward and say, okay, here's the winner. So now I went finally to the age gaps between 20. There's 4 major gaps in American politics: gender, age, race, and education. So what I'm doing here, because you don't want to have a really complicated table. So what I simply did was I looked at the Biden coalition in 2020, and I looked at the gap. How much did Biden win men among? How much did he win? How much did he win women by? And so and then I compare it to where Biden was. So this is what's happening in 2024. And men, and the gap between men, Harris versus Harris-Biden in terms of about the same. But on women, it looks like she has an advantage over Biden, and that might get to 13, 14%. Some people have it at 13, 14. We don't, but it could grow over the next couple of weeks. So it is in double digits. So the gap, more women are voting for Harris than women who voted for Biden. On age, we did under 30, 30 to 44, 45 to 64. And on each of these groups, she's doing just a little bit less. A little bit less well they did, and not much within the margin of error, but a little less. And frankly, it took me a long time to sit there and say less, because it could have been, but I went with less because it was slightly less, point and a half less. What about the gaps on race and education? Well, here's one of the big ones. On whites, she's even. On blacks, she has a 60-point gap. That is 60%. If you look at, when you poll black African Americans, what you get is that it's a gap 60% more, so it's 70 to 10, means 70% as opposed to 10 or whatever. That's the gap is 60 points. So 60% more blacks are voting for Harris than are voting for Trump. But that's less, a bit less than Biden had, and I'm sure you've heard the percentage of African-American males that are voting for Trump this time, or say they're voting for Trump, is about 12 to 14%, and that's higher, and that's what's causing that. Among other, and here's the big one, Hispanics. That Hispanic gap was really big in Hillary. Hillary had a huge advantage in the Hispanic vote. That dropped in 2020. It dropped in two places. It dropped in Miami-Dade, and the major place it dropped was all along the Texas border. There were swings along the Texas border of up to 20 points away from Democrats to the Republicans, and that gap, in the same places, that gap has grown a little bit. That gap's grown in the 2024 election. So, and there's a slight gain in the Asian American vote. Now on education, this is a gap. Democrats used to win the high school or less vote because that was the kind of blue-collar union vote. And Trump has split that. 2016, 2020, and 2024, there's a gap, and the gap now favors Republicans. The high school or less are much more likely to vote Republican, and the flip is on the other side, where college graduates, and especially College Plus, are much more Democratic than they used to be. So if you look down at that one, it's high school, the gap is still around 12, 13 points. In regard to some college, if you have some college but not college, that vote is that's a little bit pro-Trump. But among College Plus, there's a gain for Harris. So once again, going through all that left you with the same result as the poll. Are we right or wrong? Who knows? All right. So now what follows is we're doing the 7 states that matter. Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. You can tell I've done this before. And so this is a techie audience, so this is what we did. It's a multi-level regression with post-stratification. It's an MRP model. 3 stages. We estimate the likelihood of voting. Conditional upon voting, what is the probability of voting for a major party or third-party candidate? And finally, predict support for Harris and Trump among major party voters. I leave you, I'm just going to skip ahead to this and I'll come back. I leave you this table. You can get it and look it up and blow it up. I was damned if I was doing any more with it. I typed that up. So anyway, we'll do another one in 2 weeks. But at that point, that's our best estimate of where we are. So now what are the states that matter? And I know there are a lot of polls out there, New York Times, Siena, not to knock them. But when they say, somebody came up to me before and said, there's a recent poll that shows Trump's ahead in all 7 states. Those polls have like 400 or 500 voters in those states. We have thousands. So I'm betting on ours, unless we're wrong. Well, I mean, I don't think we're... All right, sorry. So here's where we have it. Nevada, we have Harris up 50-48, margin of error. We have in Arizona, we have Harris and Trump in a dead tie. In North Carolina, we have Trump up by 1. In Pennsylvania, we have Harris up by 1. And in Georgia, we have Trump up 1. And in Michigan, there we have not in the margin of error. We have Michigan and Wisconsin at 3 points or more. So that's not the margin of error. So I would say they're ahead in this one. So given that, what is the only thing that matters? The Electoral College. What happens there? So this is where we get to it. Scenario number 1. The polls are underestimating, so if we underestimate Trump's support by 1 or 2 points, then he's going to win most of the states he did in 2016, and he's going to win. This is if he takes all of those states. He didn't take Nevada, but if he takes all of those states that show up that way, then he wins 306 to 32. I don't think that will happen, but that's the scenario on that side. Now, what about the narrowest possible scenario? So this is, she holds the blue wall, and the blue wall is Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. If she holds the blue wall, then going, this is so great, then going in, she has 269 votes, and he has 268. As you know, or may not, not Michigan, but Nebraska and Maine don't do their vote by winner take all. They do it by congressional district. So Maine, which has 4 votes, and 1 and 2 district. District 2 is rural and Republican, so Maine was 3-1 Biden. And Nebraska is 5, and Nebraska, 3 congressional districts. The 2nd district is Omaha. That district was carried by Biden, usually 5-6 points. There was some redistricting, making it closer. But on this scenario where she retains the blue wall, then what happens is that if Trump carries the 2nd district, it's 269-269. Tie goes to the House of Representatives, means Trump wins. Because in the House of Representatives, each state gets 1 vote. So Wyoming is 1, and California is 1. And so given that we're only, Trump wins. So it could come down to the 2nd district of Nebraska. What a great way to decide elections. Okay, now this is my view of what's more likely, and this is not based on the model. And a couple say I think Trump will take Arizona, and I think he'll take Georgia. I think that Michigan and Wisconsin will go to Harris, and then I think the key states are North Carolina and Pennsylvania and Nevada. If she loses Nevada, that's big trouble because Nevada is the one swing state that's during all this period voted Democrat, voted for Hillary, so on and so forth. So Nevada, if she loses Nevada, then she's going to lose Pennsylvania too, I think. So that's the way I have it. And now you're down to questions of ground game. Democrats have a better ground game. They have more people on the ground in Pennsylvania and Nevada and North Carolina than the Republicans do. And the Republicans' strategy was to pay a firm to go out and do this. And they're doing that. But in the last few days, they've started a panic, and so they're shipping volunteers in. And how that works out, hard to tell. I do know that we do have some research on, in 2016 and 2020, there are a lot of Californians went to other states to try and convince people. It didn't work too well. Well, imagine you're saying you're in you're in Georgia. Yeah, I'm from California. I'm here to encourage you. Yeah, good. Good. See ya. So that hasn't worked very well. So we don't know about that. And in a state where differences are small, it's fine. The other thing is North Carolina. I did a map of North Carolina, the areas where that were hardest hit by the flood, and more electricity outage for a longer time period. They're the most heavily Republican areas in the state. Now, in the past, when we had hurricanes, tornadoes, et cetera, that depresses turnout in those areas. So, and if a state's going to be decided by less than 1% of the vote, that could matter. So we just can't. we just can't know. It's going to turn on all kinds of factors like that we don't have any control over. All right, so now here's another depressed. So we spent a lot of time measuring called persuadables. And so normally people, the way they get normal, when they do it normally, pollsters just go, okay, people who say I'm undecided, that's the people who are persuaded. We didn't do that. When we did the poll and asked who are you voting for in a trial heat, are you voting for Harris or Trump? We followed it up with a question to say, even if you voted for Trump, would you consider Harris? Anybody that said yes, we put them in the persuadable and vice versa. So, and that number's been falling. And so look at those numbers. Harris, definitely 40.1. Definitely Trump, 39.5. Lean Harris, 0.8. Lean Trump, 1. Maybe Harris, 6. Maybe Trump, 6.3. So I looked at who these persuadables are. They're moderates. 85% of them are independents. And they are the least likely to vote. So you have a much harder time predicting whether they'll vote or not. So even if we get down to the persuadables like that, it's still kind of flip it up. You can see what a great time we're having. Now, I gave a talk in San Francisco to some venture capitalists and hedge funds people, and they wanted to talk about this poly market. Do all you know what poly market is? It's a cryptocurrency market that bets a lot of money on the politics. And this is the cryptocurrency 5941 Trump. That big bump toward the end turns out to be a Republican donor that put about $4.5 million in there. So I wouldn't bet on that. I mean, there are some advantages to betting pools like that, right? The advantage is it's kind of like a market. So if there's a debate, we've got a poll, but it's a day or two before we get that poll and put it out. And in a market, if you think the debate went one way or the other, bam, so you could put money in and bet instantaneously. And so that's some of the advantage. I don't have the numbers on this, but I do think better than the poly market is Goldman Sachs, for the first time, I think it's Goldman Sachs, has put together a Trump basket and a Harris basket of stocks. And they're looking at the stock. And interestingly, the good thing about that was on the Harris and on the Trump basket, they didn't go up after the debate. So these guys I was giving the talk to, they were, so why shouldn't it have gone up? And the point is, then I showed them the data. So, well, it didn't change anybody. The market was pretty good. They knew it didn't change anybody. But in the last few days, we don't know why, the Trump basket, including his the Twitter alternative, that has been going up. So, again, I don't know, but if I wanted to count on one of those, I'd count on the Goldman Sachs. I think that the Goldman Sachs and we can't go back and predict how they did. They didn't have it in 2020 or 2016, and you can't bet on poly market, but of course you can. There's instructions on how you could do it with cryptocurrency. And then toward the end, remember at the end. Don't think it's going to be over easily, because what's going to happen is the same thing that happened in 2020. There are mostly Democrats voted online. So during the election, when the tails are coming in, Republicans voted on election day. Those votes are counted for. So let me give an example of Pennsylvania. Trump was ahead early until 11, 12 o'clock at night. He was ahead in Pennsylvania. The reason being, Pennsylvania has a rule that says you cannot count mail-in ballots until election day. And now that's changed, because now they can postmark them a few days later. So this is a poll in our polls, some states have already started to vote. So in the last Stanford poll, there are 512. And that question is, how did you vote post-24? Because they've already voted. So note, of the people who've already voted, Harris is winning by 15 points. So you're again going to have, looks to me like going to have that same phenomenon of Democrats voting in mail or before, and Republicans voting on election day. So election day, it's going to be red. Now the people who do this for CBS and so on and so forth, they know all this, and they've got that calculated. So their reports take this into account, but you can count on this. And I guess the last thing is you can count on is going to be a while before we know. The Republicans are prepared to challenge the vote across the board, and Democrats are prepared for that and ready to go. So lawyers are going to do very well during this period. No MBAs, just lawyers at this time. Okay, and this is the table that you can, I'm not going through that. This is the 50 states, the only 7 that matter I've given you, but that's our estimate, and they'll make the slides available to you, and then you can just pull it apart with your fingers. That's it. Thank you.
Two-part question.
Yeah.
One is, how did you take into account the proportion of people who would actually lie to you to your face in terms of their voting, since many people I know will not do that, for both in the center of the country.
We
as
paid
well as
we paid $250,000 to Vote Alert to go out and check the record of whether they voted or not. So everybody in this poll voted.
But when they say that they're going to vote for a particular candidate at this point, many people are hesitant that I know, for example, in the middle of the country, that are very, very concerned about their vote potentially being known to their employer, etc. The second point is...
We don't have much evidence of that, and I don't know very many Trump voters who are quiet about it. If that's a Trump vote or the other way, generally it's a Trump side.
Both directions.
Yeah, okay.
Both directions.
That's possible. That's possible.
The second is, as Jeffrey Pfeffer taught in his class, and Mr. Caro pointed out that, that Johnson stole his first election by stuffing the ballot box. You mean
the 87 vote landslide?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
So my question is, how do you take that into account, if at all?
Well, it's hard to do. I mean, people aren't going to tell you, yeah, by the way, we stole the election. I don't think Trump won. I'm absolutely certain Trump didn't win the last election. Yeah, I know that, but that's sort of the claim, and that's going around. It's very hard. There's a couple of really good websites. One of them is a guy named Justin Grimmer. So if you look up Justin Grimmer, he's at Stanford. He tries to deal with all those questions in a very complicated statistical way, but even it's hard. So just think of it like this. Think of all the mail-in ballots. Yeah, okay, well. All right, think of all the mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots go, we don't know what happens when they're in there. Suppose the male head of the household just gets the ballots and marks them off and sends them back. We don't know that, right? So we just, there's some of that we just don't know, and we're not going to, but mail ballots aren't going away. They get more and more popular. So that's a hard question, which I've avoided the answer.
Is Elon Musk affecting the election? Is Elon Musk affecting the election?
Geez, these are questions I have no answer. Well, that little bump in Polymarket, the one that went up, that's the same day as he made his comment for Trump on October 7th. So it's possible on that, but no, I don't. What we know about celebrity endorsements is that, thank God, they don't make much difference. So we didn't test Elon Musk, but we did spend, in my view, an inordinate amount of time on Taylor Swift. And I would have never even known who she was if I didn't watch Kansas City football. But we found no evidence that, with a lot of stuff, we found no evidence that that was affecting turnout among young people. We couldn't find any effect. Like, yes. And then so I can't all see all of that. So you get the next one. You go and then over there.
Okay. So thank you for all the humor in your presentation. So I'm from Russia and I had an economics degree and I studied corruption and elections theoretically. You know, my thesis was about it.
Yeah.
So we use votes flow model to compare election with another election by the smallest electoral, regions. So there are like 100,000 regions in Russia. All the data is public, and you can correlate how people change their votes from one election to another. So in this American election, we'll have one candidate, same candidate, in 3 different elections. So you can, in theory, use that voter flow models and see how people change their behavior statistically, from one voting region to another. So do you study these kind of models?
We have done that, but in this particular case, since we went out and verified the 2020 vote and the 2024, when I looked at the gap and the difference between the 2020, that was by individual. So we can track, because it's the same people, I can track over this election cycle exactly what's happening to voters and who's changing. So that, and we can't go back to 2016 and do that, but we did with the 2020. We know they voted in 2020. We know Biden won in 2020, and the numbers, so we can trace that, and so it's a form of that. But you could do that, but we think this is a better way.
Do you see what is known as the Bradley factor happening this year?
Well, the Bradley effect is, no, we don't. But the Bradley effect was as follows. There was an election where Bradley, who was the African-American mayor of Los Angeles, he was running against Duke-Majian for governor of California. Part of the Bradley problem was that in those days, the interviews were done face-to-face, which were no longer done because of, and if there were African-American interviewers, people would not say that they weren't going to vote for Bradley, and that's allegedly that's one story about the Bradley effect and why it doesn't work now. But we have very little effect of we have very little. When we try and look pretty hard for that, we don't get much of an effect. So when we looked at where we went wrong in 2020, it was one of the things we looked at. The thing that was looked to us like it was the most plausible explanation for why we missed it was we didn't have enough rural voters. Now we do, and we'll see. So yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm an American who's lived overseas for 20 years. And increasingly, the view of the U.S. is that it's more and more unsafe. Why isn't public safety and gun control more of an issue?
Well, because it's main reason is it's sorted. It's sorted. California has rules that don't apply in New York. And in Montana, John Tester has a tough race in Montana, the Senate this time. And if John Tester in Montana, who's a Democrat, if he came out and said, well, I don't think gun control, he's gone. And so control of the Senate hangs on a few states like that. And the second thing is, the issue is more complicated. The states that have the most guns, Montana per capita guns, don't have that higher murder rate. Turns out they have a very high suicide rate with guns, but that's a separate problem. So there's 3 problems with guns, right? One, there's the problem of suicide. One, there's the problem of guns, violent death. And third, there's the terrorism problem on that. And it's sort of sorted by public opinion. And in politics, you wouldn't win many votes. People's minds are set in those areas, and you can't cross it. And that's also part of the rather strange American electoral system. In a European system where everybody votes on one day and it's pretty simple and it's over, I think you could I'll give them Australia did an unbelievable job with gun control. They went back and they bought back guns and they passed a law and they said the guns, and the violence rate has gone way down. Given the American system of 50 states, checks and balances, not going to happen in the short run. Sad to say. Oh, here I'll give you the prediction. I didn't do this, but the House and the Senate, based on these models of the 120,000, because we have enough to do congressional districts, the probability the Senate goes Republican is about 0.7. West Virginia is gone, meaning West Virginia will go Republican after Manchin's retirement. And then the next most likely state is Montana with Tester. It looks to me, if I had to bet, I would say the Senate is 51-49. Brown in Ohio, it's close, but he looks like he's a little bit ahead. Rosen in Nevada, that Senate seat looks okay. And same across the upper Midwest. And the one in Pennsylvania is a little closer, but the Republicans are 52 would be max, I think. And the House, we have the probability at about 0.65 Democrat. So you would have, and the reason for that is the competitive seats, the ones that are going to switch it, there are 5 in New York and 5 or 6 in California, and those are trending Democratic at the moment. And it doesn't take very many votes to switch it.
Thank you, terrific presentation. So my question is, based on your experience or your gut, what is the impact of polls on actual voter turnout and decisions? So if it were a weekend and it's really close, does that mean more people are going to vote? Does that help the Republicans more, the Democrats? If one side is weighing the lead, does that actually hurt them because people feel they don't need to go out and vote? Just your general thoughts on that.
It's a really complicated question. There are a bunch of papers that have very mixed findings on that. So as you know, on election night, you can't reveal any of the post-election polls when people are coming out of the polls after having voted. It could have some effect, but the problem in the 2020 in this election is going to be that Trump is a gigantic turnout machine. He turns out Republican voters and he turns out Democratic voters. The 2020 presidential election had the highest turnout in an American election since the early 20th century. And the 2022 election had the highest congressional turnout since 1906 or 1910. So that's a good question, but the Trump effect is going to mask it. Sorry, thank you very much.